I don't know what to do. It all started 3 weeks ago. My mom disappeared. She was at home in the morning, nothing different. She hugged me, saying goodbye, wished me luck with school, and gave me a packed lunch. And when I got home that evening, she wasn't there. She didn't come back. So we called the police and all of the search was set up. The whole town came together and held a giant search party, lasting through the night, but there was no sign of her at all. She had just completely vanished. The weeks since were hell for both me and my dad. Rumors started spreading through town, and particularly around the school, that my mom had been murdered. Dad took things a lot worse than I did. He was a carpenter, so it wasn't unusual behavior for him to disappear into the garage for a long time to work on a chair or table or something. Especially, it was what he always did when he was stressed. I figured that's just how he was dealing with the grief. We barely spoke over the next couple weeks. He was locked in there from sunrise to midnight. And we might bump into each other at one point, but he'd just say goodnight and went to bed. Sure, it was a bit weird, but I understood that he was going through a lot. But the longer he spent in there, the less I was sure he was doing woodwork. There were large bottles of bleach popping up in our bins, and Dad barely took any break. One night, I had waited for him to go to sleep, and I crept down to try to open the door, but it was locked tight, and Dad always had the key. But today, when I came home from school, he was in the kitchen, freshly shaved, showered, had a rested face. He was totally different from what he'd been for the last couple of weeks. He was cooking. My dad used to love grilling, and his steaks were always amazingly delicious. So it was a nice change, since I fed myself only pot noodles and soup for a few weeks. He set down two of the biggest, bloodiest steaks I had ever seen in my life. But it looked kind of different. Not bad, but just different. Dad tucked into a steak straight away, and I did too. It was a bit tough to chew, but the seasoning and flavors tasted just as good as the rest of the steaks were. We had finished pretty soon, and I was feeling full and satisfied. Then Dad said something I can't stop thinking about. I doubt they'll ever find her body. His voice didn't sound sad or depressed. I didn't say anything, just stared at him. Hearing what he said sent shivers down my spine. Then I thought of the steaks. The late nights in the garage, hundreds of bleach bottles, and my dad's weird behavior. Did he feed me her body? Or am I just overthinking it? What do I do? When I was 16, my parents, brother, and I were living in an apartment on the fourth floor. Every night, we heard crazy laughing outside of our house. At first, we just thought it could have been a neighbor taking care of a sick person, so we didn't worry about it. Then one night, I heard laughing again. It was 11 p.m., and everyone in my house was sleeping. I got out of bed and looked out the window, and I saw nothing. And as soon as I looked out the window, the laughing stopped. It was kind of weird, but anyway, I just went back into bed and slept. After that, I had to use the bathroom at 4:30 a.m. The bathroom was downstairs in the hall, and the bathroom window was facing a big field of grass and a parking lot. After I finished using the bathroom and washed my hands, I heard that crazy loud laugh again for about a whole 30 seconds. It sounded like this person didn't even get tired. He seemed that he needed to catch his breath from this loud and long laughing. I proceeded to look out the window again, and then I saw a group of about 5 dogs going crazy around something. And when the dogs moved, I absolutely felt fear. There was something, another dog. I think it was a dog. It had a dog body and paws, but not a dog face. It had a human face and it was staring at me. It looked at me for a minute and then started to slowly smile, and then laughed again, and that was the same voice that I've heard constantly. I ran to my room, but I couldn't go back to sleep. The next morning, I told my parents and brother what had happened, and they thought I had a nightmare. I said that I swear it wasn't a nightmare, but they didn't believe me. They just laughed and ignored it. Everything felt real. I know it was 100% real. But the next few days went by, and I didn't hear anything. And one day, it was getting quite dark outside. I did end up getting a cold from swimming, so my parents and brother went out grocery shopping without me. It was 9 p.m., and I took my dog for a walk for a little while. There was an abandoned house down the block, and my dog took off running to a bush suddenly. It was like something caught his attention. I ran after my dog, and literally I had to crawl under a fence to go and get him. When I finished crawling under the fence, I ended up cutting my knee. But thankfully, I got my dog, and when I looked up, there that thing was. That dog with a human face. We were face to face. It had glowing green eyes, and it had definitely human face features, and the head was bald. I screamed, and it just started that scary laughing again. I ran away with my dog and came back home. Well, I'm 18 now, and my family and I moved away to another place. I don't know what the heck that thing was, and why I've seen it twice. But I'm just glad that I don't see it anymore.
I recently moved out to attend university in a different town, so I rented a flat where I live alone. Every morning, I took my bicycle, which I keep in the basement of my building, and went to my lectures. Usually, the neighborhood is quiet, but one night around 1 o'clock a.m., my door phone rang. This was unusual, but I brushed it off as a mistake from someone who got drunk. It rang again, but I kept ignoring it. This happened at least 3 different times, so it began to annoy me. One day, I returned from my lecture and found a bus ticket placed on my door handle. This ticket was from a bus in my hometown, and it appeared to be mine, as the bus number on it was the bus that I frequently used. At this moment, I started to get concerned that someone was pranking me. That same night, I kept my front window a bit open to keep an eye on the entrance. I live on the 2nd floor, so it's too high for anyone to climb. I shut the lights and waited. And at that moment, the door phone rang again. This time, I checked through the window and there was a shadowy figure of a man. He waited for about 5 minutes and then left. I considered calling the police, but I had nothing to report besides a strange man ringing my door phone late at night, so I soon ignored it. But what happened some days after almost made me go crazy. It was around 3 a.m., and the door phone rang again. By this time, though, I heard the front door shut. Someone must have forgotten to lock it, so I assumed that the man was now inside the building. Terrified, I went to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I had. Then I stood behind the front door and waited. The doorbell rang. I think my stomach dropped at that point. He rang again and then knocked strongly. I stayed frozen for an eternity until I couldn't hear anything. I was relieved and went to sleep after a while, which in hindsight was very stupid, as I should have made sure that the man had left the building. The following morning, as I was leaving for my lecture, I noticed some scratches near the front door's handle, as if someone had tried to mess with the lock. I immediately went to my landlord, who lives right above me, and explained everything that had been going on. He reassured me that everything would be fine. So I went to get my bike, But as I walked towards the basement door, I noticed that the lock was broken. I finally understood. The man from last night must have hidden in there. I hadn't heard the front door shut again yesterday, so that must have meant that the man was still here. I ran upstairs again and told my landlord. He got angry, grabbed a bat, and went to check. All I could hear was struggling noises as my landlord beat that man senseless. We then called the police, who arrived a few moments later and arrested him. I still remember his face to this day, as he looked straight at me silently. It turned out that this man had been following me for days and was trying to rob my house. He had done the same thing to other people in the past. I don't know what happened to him afterwards, but I assume he is in prison. I am forever grateful to my landlord for being so brave. We replaced the locks on every door, so now I feel safer. Well, I would have forgotten about this if I didn't open my mailbox recently and find another bus ticket.
My name is Michael, and it happened 2 years ago. I had some friends at the time. Let's call them Dan, Sarah, and Hazel. We decided to make our little party of explorers exploring forests and abandoned structures and such. That day was our first exploration, an abandoned house just at the end of my neighborhood. We started walking toward that house and reached it soon. People said that it was built in the 1940s. It had been owned by a man who abandoned it after moving to live in the nursing home, and the house has been left alone since then. We were outside for a while, and Dan says we should go inside. We decided to check out the well first, which was next to the house. The well was stone and round, which looked exactly like the same thing as in the Ring movie. There was a piece of old wood board covering the top. All of a sudden, Dan jumped up on the board like a maniac. Then his leg fell through the small opening. If he would have fallen in, we'd have been in big trouble. Luckily, he lifted his leg out of the opening and acted like nothing just happened. We went inside, and we could smell a very strong odor emitting from inside the house. It was very gross, but putting smells aside, we came across a bunch of weird things around the house. Clothes packed in a freezer, a fireplace with dolls inside, an upside-down table. It kind of looked like an art museum. Things started to get kind of eerie. Then we entered a bedroom this time, and the roof was almost caved in. Clothes with stains everywhere, and a black ooze was rolled down across the ceiling. I was going to puke at this point. And at that moment, we heard some distinct chewing sounds. And we freaked out, so we didn't have any choice except we were going outside. But when we left the room, barely, we all froze. A man who wore a scruffy lime green shirt and old gym shorts stood in front of the front door. He seemed like that he didn't shower for a few months. He just stood there and glared at us with a fierce look. He slowly lifted his arm to show us. It looked like a lump of raw meat with the blood still dripping from it. That guy was chewing his arm. My legs were shaking. I wanted to cry at that time. He shouted, "Get the hell out of here," in a hoarse voice, and we ran away. I couldn't believe what it was I saw. After that, I never met the same guy in my neighborhood. We haven't told our parents yet, and I'm still wondering, would he still be there if I visit that house again? This story happened in July in the year 2016. We had the clown scandal in the US, and it was pretty crazy. People would dress up in clown costumes and stalk people, and sometimes even do worse. My friend Miguel and I went to spend the night at our other friend's house, whose name is Milo. We showed up at his house around 3 p.m. We just watched movies and ate snacks, just regular teenager stuff. Milo's house was next to a park, so we would usually go back to our home pretty late and walk the track. After watching movies all day, we eventually got bored of it, so we decided to go to the park and walk around for a bit. When we got to the park, the time was exactly 2:36 a.m. At first, we just walked around, talking about girls at our school and other stuff. After we rounded a corner around the park bathrooms, that's when we saw him. There was a man in a black and white clown costume with no mask on, standing by the swings. He was looking at us with his head slightly tilted over to his right side. I mentioned that he had no mask, so we could clearly see his face. The man had a really dirty face with long, black, greasy hair. And he had a creepy smile on his face. His smile was almost stretched cheek to cheek. Even though he was pretty far from us, we could still see that he was staring right at us. We got nervous and scared, so we agreed to run back to Milo's house, since we were on the side of the park. We started the countdown in a whisper. 3, 2, 1. And then we started running as fast as we could back to the house. After running for a minute, we made it to Milo's street and started running again toward his house in the middle of the road. When we made it to his house, we turned around to look down the street. And to our horror, we saw the man in the clown costume standing at the end of the road, only illuminated by a streetlight. He wasn't running or walking towards us. He just stood there. However, we are all sure that he followed us. And down in his hand, we were able to see that he was holding a long, sharp kitchen knife. We pounded the front door, ran inside Milo's house, and went into his living room. Milo asked what was going on, so we explained everything that just happened. He has one of those doorbells with a camera in it, so we sat in silence watching the monitor on the wall. We then saw the man walking down the street looking left and right at each of the houses, probably checking to see if we were hiding. That clown guy finally stood just in front of Milo's house. We all got shocked, but we tried not to scream at all. And all of a sudden, he was looking through that camera lens of the doorbell. That was the creepiest moment I've ever had before. Luckily, he kept walking down the street, and we never saw him again. And we've never spoke to anyone about this story. And to this day, I wonder what could have happened if we didn't decide to run to Milo's house when we did.
Hi, I'm Evelyn and I'm 13 years old. This happened when I went to my stepbrother who lives overseas. I was staying there for a week, and one day I went to a local market with my sister-in-law, her daughter, and my mom to buy groceries. After we bought some vegetables, my mom and my sister-in-law wanted to get some bowls and cups, but I didn't really care about it because I just wanted to go home already. I was tired of walking. As we were walking to another shop, a guy who looked to be in his 40s or 50s came up to me and gave me a flower. To be honest, he looked kind of innocent at first. I didn't think that my mom or the others noticed what happened because they just entered the shop. Well, now I feel like I should tell you the fact that I look older than I actually am. Because of the way I dress, some people think that I'm 16 or 17. Anyway, I will go back to the story. When he gave me a flower, I was a bit surprised, but just thanked him for it. And before I turned to go, he then asked me if he could give a hug. I got a little scared because I always see lots of stuff on the internet, so I knew that I shouldn't let him hug me. I tried to give him his flower back, and I kept telling him that no, I'm not really comfortable with hugging strangers. But he kept insisting that he wanted to hug me, and I refused again and again. After he understood that he is not allowed to hug me, he seemed to have given up. So I thought it was over and turned around. Then all of a sudden he grabbed me and tried to kiss the back of my hand. I immediately pulled my hand away, and at that point I was scared but really angry too. I knew that my mom was in the shop, but the road was quiet, so this situation was enough to make me afraid. After I pulled my hand away, he seemed surprised, like I did something wrong to him. Then he asked me if we could get married. I was asking myself if he was joking or something. I refused it, of course, but then he asked if he could have children with me. When I looked up at him, he was smiling and looked happy. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was literally shaking. At that moment, a miracle happened. I'm not sure if he saw another girl or he just realized there was no point in trying anymore, but anyway, he said, "All right, have a good day," and walked to the other side of the road. I was relieved that he gave up, so I rushed into the store. I got next to my mom, but said nothing. And on our way to the car, I threw the flower away, feeling disgusted. I could come back home, and I felt thankful that I would be here with my family. After that, whenever I go outside, I always beware of everything and never receive any stuff from strangers.
My name is Chad, and this story took place when I was about 12. I was at home with my mom since my dad was going to be out all night. 3 of my best friends came to my house for a sleepover party. We sat in my room playing PlayStation and watching TV. Soon, we noticed it was getting pretty dark outside. Mom ordered pizza for dinner, so when the doorbell rang, we knew that the pizza had arrived. When my mom opened the door, my friends and I were just right next to her because we were pretty hungry at that time. So we waited for her to take her money out and pay for it. The pizza delivery guy seemed like he was in his mid-50s and looked pretty old. While my mother was taking her money out, he looked at us. And all of a sudden, a creepy grin appeared on his face, and his eyes were wide open. It was kind of weird, but we just laughed it off as we didn't think much of it. My mom handed him the money, the pizza guy gave us the pizza, and then left. We took the pizza into my room and watched Netflix while we were eating it. A few hours passed, and my mom came up to our room and said, "It's time for you guys to go to bed. If you need anything, just let me know." My friends brought sleeping bags from their home, so we all got ready to go to bed and lied down. I turned the lights off and went into my bed. We talked to each other for about 45 minutes until it was around 11:45, close to midnight, and we eventually got tired of it. We closed our eyes, not saying a word to one another. Later that night, I heard rustling coming from the backyard. It sounded like someone was walking on a pile of leaves. At first, I thought it was a cat walking around looking for food, as they usually do. However, the next thing I heard was a loud thump. It sounded a lot closer, and like it was hitting my wall. At that time, we already all got up from our spot and heard it. We were so scared to look outside through the window and check what was going on. And then, we saw a hand on the window, lifting it up much higher. We all screamed with fear, and the guy still tried to crawl in. But one of my friends thought much faster. He locked the window, and we all ran out of my room. Then, our house security alarm started going off like crazy. My mom, who was sleeping in her bedroom, came out, turned it off, and asked what was going on. We explained what just happened and looked at the cameras, which were set up outside of our house. There was a guy quietly trying to come down a ladder. I realized the thump on the wall we heard was a ladder. Mom quickly got out her phone and called the police. We locked all of the doors and came back to the monitors to look at the cameras. And we saw the man opened our backyard shed and hid in there. In just a few minutes, the police were already arrived. 3 officers went outside searching for the man, while we gave information to the other officer. And we told him that we saw the man going into the shed out in our backyard. One of the police was holding a gun, and the other 2 were approaching closer to the shed. In the blink of an eye, they had entered the shed, found him in the shed hiding, put him in handcuffs to arrest him. They brought him out front and put him in the back of a police car. That time, lots of people heard the noise, came outside to see what was going on. And surprisingly, the cops found some things like a knife, hammer, and other from his pocket. As he was in the back seat of the car, he looked at us and gave us a creepy grin with wide eyes. At first, I couldn't see his face clearly, but when I concentrated on focusing it more visibly, I was shocked. It was the pizza delivery guy. After that, the police handled the situation so we could go back to sleep again that night. I don't know what this guy would have done to us if he had successfully got inside.
My name is Drian. Sleep paralysis happened to me very often until I turned 22. The first occurrence was when I was 12. It was summer break time, so we were having a sleepover at my aunt's house for a week. All my other cousins around my age were also there, so I was really excited during that time. One night, all of my cousins and the adults in the house were asleep. I was the only one still awake, playing games on my cousin's laptop. I was not scared at all staying up that late, because my other young cousins were in the same room as me. After I finished playing games, I went to bed around 2 or 3 a.m. I passed out quickly. Then, I woke up by something that I didn't know, and I couldn't move my body. I could only see my surrounding area and my other cousins asleep. I panicked and struggled to move. Finally, I was able to wake myself up, so I got up and immediately ran to my aunt's room. It was the first time I had experienced that kind of situation, so I was crying a lot. She comforted me and let me stay with her until morning. That morning, I did some research on what it was and realized that it was sleep paralysis. Well, they said it happened to many people, so I just thought it was a normal occurrence. Weeks, months, and years passed. It still happened to me. But I was not scared of it anymore because I got used to it. I already knew what to do when it happened to me. A few years later, my parents left the house to work overseas. So it was just me, my younger brother, and my older male cousin in our house. One afternoon, it was our grandmother's birthday. I was tired of playing computer game tournaments online all night and needed some sleep. So I decided that I wouldn't go with them. I told them that I would catch up with them in the evening. I went to bed, and again, sleep paralysis occurred. It really pissed me off, because I needed some rest so I could go to the birthday party and not look tired. I couldn't move my body but could still see the surrounding area. But then, something was different. There she was. I saw the silhouette of a woman. She was wearing a black dress. I couldn't tell if she was wearing a veil or it was just her long hair that almost covered her face. And furthermore, I couldn't completely see her face because it was all blurry. I was so scared. What was going on here? She was just standing by the door looking at me as I struggled to wake myself up. She looked like she was smiling, and all of a sudden she jumped towards me and grabbed me. She was trying to get inside my body. I resisted and struggled, but couldn't scream at all. After some struggling, I was able to push her back and woke myself up. I screamed and was really scared, so I left the house and went to the birthday party. All my cousins asked me what happened, and I explained it to them. They gave me some advice to just pray before I go to bed. So I took their advice and prayed, but it didn't work at all. It was really scary because it was the first time that I saw someone or something. 2 years later, me and my brother moved to Italy with my parents, and we shared the same room. And one night, I went to sleep, but my brother was still awake playing computer games. Again, I saw the same dark figure of a woman from back in our old house. She was at my feet, grabbing my legs, trying to pull me down. I tried to struggle and really wanted to scream for help to my brother, but I couldn't do it. I could see my brother looking at me with a confused face. He thought that maybe I was just dreaming and talking in my sleep. The idiot even laughed at me. I was just trying to resist and not get pulled by the dark-figured woman, and after some struggling, I was able to wake myself up. But this time, I still saw the dark-figured woman, but my brother couldn't. I pointed my finger at it, but my brother still didn't see anything. He just said there was nobody there. And seconds or minutes later, it slowly faded. I told my mother about it, and she didn't really believe me and even told me that it was because I didn't go to church and pray. Another night, sleep paralysis occurred again, and I saw this woman again. She was really close to me, but I still couldn't see her face. It was all black and blurry. And this time, she literally talked to me. She whispered into my ear, "I will give you anything you want. Money, fame, glory. All you need to do is let me in." I told her, "No, please leave me alone," and woke myself up again. That was the last time I saw her. That was in 2017, and now it's 2019. I'm 22 now. I'm not scared of sleep paralysis, but the only thing is, I'm just scared of that dark-figured woman.